Welcome to The Growth Shift, the podcast where we unlock the psychological and strategic blueprints of predictable growth. If you've built a successful business, you know the truth. Your expertise is high value, but your time is finite. The question is, how do you sustain that success without sacrificing your most valuable asset? We believe that the next level of success requires a strategic pivot, a fundamental shift that moves beyond the old ways. In every episode, we dive into the critical turning points of industry leaders and uncover how they're leveraging AI not as a shortcut, but as the strategic force for their next growth shift. Today, we dive in with a leader who is defining the future of their industry. This episode is brought to you by Valentix. At Valentix, we help coaches and consultants who are struggling with generating consistent, high-quality leads, automating their client onboarding processes, and scaling their operations without simply adding more hours or headcount. Most of the time, our clients come to us frustrated because they're bogged down in manual tasks and feel like they're missing out on the power of modern technology. But with the right strategy and AI-powered solutions, they're able to streamline their workflows, attract better opportunities, and achieve sustainable growth. If that sounds like you or someone you know, learn more at valentix.io. Now let's dive into today's episode. Today on The Growth Shift, we are privileged to host Andrea Simon, a true pioneer in strategic transformation and the visionary behind Simon Associates Management Consultants. Andrea's remarkable career journey, from a tenured professor of American Studies and anthropology to a senior executive in corporate life, and now a celebrated corporate anthropologist and blue ocean strategist, positions her uniquely to guide organizations through complex change. As an author and a seasoned podcaster herself, ranked among the top for her insights on change, Andrea helps leaders not just compete, but create entirely new markets. Her deep understanding of human behavior, organizational culture, and innovative growth strategies promises to deliver profound insights for her audience. Andrea, welcome to The Growth Shift.
David, what a pleasure. I'd like to meet that woman you just mentioned.
Well, hey, she's sitting right in front of me, and we're going to draw that story out. Andrea, your career path is incredibly distinctive. Moving from a tenured professor of American Studies and anthropology to a senior corporate executive, and now leading Simon Associates Management Consultants as a corporate anthropologist. Could you share with us how these diverse academic and corporate foundations cultivated your unique expertise in helping organizations navigate and embrace change?
What a wonderful way to summarize a journey. And people often ask, well, did you plan on this? I said, no, really and truly, I started out in love with anthropology. And I did my research on how people migrated from Mediterranean countries to the U.S. and returned. I was really interested in how people adapted when they changed their environment, often couldn't go home again. And by chance, my husband was an executive at Citibank, and they were launching direct access and other new things during deregulation. And at a cocktail party, I met a bunch of Citibankers. And they said, we could really use you because we have all these thousands of people in a deregulated environment, and we want to teach really good people how to sell and service and not just attend. Today, they're doing the same thing with AI because they're going to retrain 170,000 people on how to prompt AI. In my day, we were just trying to figure out how to add ATMs. And so the times were changing. And I became first a consultant and then an executive. And then I was an executive at a savings bank and then a commercial bank. And we were all changing to adapt to new technology, new times, new customers. And I look back and forward with the same joy. I discovered I am both good at vacuums and happy to be discovering things that the human mind hates to change. And as both an anthropologist and someone who loves to read about the neurosciences, we're complicated critters. We would be perfectly happy still being hunters and gatherers, perhaps, but the times, they are changing. And then I got into healthcare by chance. Somebody I knew from banking was recruiting for Montefiore Medical Center, and I went there to set up their branding and marketing during managed care times. Now, if the story has some recurring theme, is that when things are changing, most people become stuck or stalled, and I become a navigator to help enable them to see things through a fresh lens. And as an anthropologist, I never stopped seeing things that way. People say, do you still do anthropology? I said, you never stop being an anthropologist. Once you understand how to step out and observe and listen and understand how the stories are telling you things, like David's story, you begin to realize that humans really don't really know what they're doing necessarily, but they begin to share with you what their story is. And we know that people live the story in their mind. And so when I launched my company, it was after, a good 20 years of not being in my own business. After 9/11, I said, it's time. And my PR firm was wonderful. And John Rossiger said, oh, Andy, you're a corporate anthropologist that helps companies change. And I went, bingo. And that's who I am and what we do. We picked up clients right away who were stuck or stalled. And we've had 23 years now of doing this. All kinds of big companies, small companies, here in India, in Mexico, Canada. And so that's been sort of the way in which Simon Associates has grown. You did mention, though, my story about Renee Mabon and the elevator in the Harvard Club. Would you like me to share a little bit about how I fell in love with blue ocean strategy as I'm building my company? Would that be kind?
We'll get there in just a moment. I think there's something here that I'm curious about that I think can bring the audience a lot of value as well. I mean, most people studying and learning about anthropology surely don't see themselves going into the consulting world eventually, but there's a lot of power there in the understanding of humans, we could say, especially when we're looking at times of critical change. Andrea, from your experience with anthropology specifically, what would you say are perhaps some of the most foundational or fundamental lessons that you learned about humans that contribute to your ability to help organizations now navigate through times of change?
There's always the academic side. You study and you learn, and then you go and you live. And you live with a community and you begin to see them and observe them as a participant observer. Somebody who isn't part of them, but neither are you just surveying them. You're watching and you're listening. So one of my favorite applied anthropology stories was I was hired by a very large senior living community on the West Coast 3 years ago. And I spent several weeks living inside their senior living, independent living facilities. Now, these are very timely kinds of questions. They wanted to know, what does quality mean? Their scores on their surveys weren't particularly complimentary. And they said, we have these beautiful facilities. What is it that we're missing that would define quality for the people who are living there? Well, I must say I lived there. And I began to listen to, 15 or 20 people tell us their stories about what quality meant to them. And I realized the gap was that they had moved in and weren't participating in all the things that the facility was providing because they didn't fit them at all. The men were particularly interesting because they had retired from senior jobs, bankers and entrepreneurs, and they were there often without a spouse, and they had gone there because of the food. It was going to be gourmet food with a fine wine sommelier. Food never came out hot, and the wine sommelier didn't know the wine. And so the promises made and the living experience were at odds with each other. And what these folks taught me a lot about was that they were empty. They had nothing to do. So what did they do every day? You'd enjoy this. They got up and went to meetings that they created. And they had meetings on safety and on food and entertainment, and they provided the insights to the executive director, who deleted them. And I said to him, but they're bringing you good ideas, but that's not their job. And so I learned a whole lot about generational differences of perception of what is real, the challenges of growing older, as well as becoming new folks and wanting to hold on to your old identity, and the difficulties of building a community. The executive director said, well, we have good stuff. I said, but nobody's coming to it. What are they telling you? This is not magic. Just observe what's going on and don't fall in love with what you believe. This is a world of we, not I. And so that's one of the ways in which an anthropologist can add value. Currently, all through my business life, whenever I picked up a new client that was stuck or stalled, first thing I did was hang out. And often they came because business wasn't growing. I said, well, let me sit on the phones and listen to who's calling. Let me go out with your salespeople and see what people are saying. And we always discovered the gaps, the opportunities. And they were trying to fit it into what we do. And I'm trying to fit it into what they could do. One person said, we should have the what if sales process. I said, yes, it's not what you do. It's what they ask for that you say we don't do. And so I've been on a journey of discovery. And for my clients, I help them step out of the comfort that they love about this is the way we do it, to see what could be done and how that could sustain your growth. particularly in fast-changing times like we're living in now. But as I go back, they've always been fast-changing, except most people hate that, and I like that. So that's my journey, David.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So to draw some insights out of that, I mean, especially with the story that you use about the independent living community, right? There were individuals there who weren't feeling they were part of that community. Maybe they weren't feeling they were contributing or they belonged. So it seems like during times of change, some of the most important factors to take into consideration to keep everyone together as a cohesive community or company moving in the same direction is taking everyone's perspectives into consideration, but also making efforts to ensure everyone feels included and feels part of the community or the culture and the direction that it's going. Otherwise, they might feel left out and they might start getting a little bit resentful, which of course can be quite detrimental. Now, Andrea, you made a jump from working in, the finance and banking world, Citibank you mentioned, to starting out on your own. Share with us then, I mean, we spoke the other day and you mentioned you had quite an experience or a pivotal moment, your own growth shift moment at the Harvard Club one day. What actually happened to lead you into the entrepreneurship world yourself?
I had already been in business 4 years. And I must say that the banking world going through its changes was actually a training ground for what I would be doing for others as a consultant. So I was really developing a skill set. One of my first and fascinating parts where they didn't know what an anthropologist did and I didn't know what a bank did, but here I am trying to help them change. It was most interesting. But, to your question, I think that serendipity has been a core part of my experiences, all by chance. Getting into banking was serendipitous. I didn't plan on it. And after I'd been in business a couple of years, one of my clients was reading Blue Ocean Strategy. Some of your listeners may be quite familiar with the book and the research, or not at all, but Renee Mabon and Chan Kim had done great research on what kinds of companies survive and thrive. So many Fortune 500 companies collapse. They read their press releases and they stop changing. And what they found was that of the 150 companies they studied, 15% of them actually continue to thrive because of a very different kind of strategy. It wasn't to compete, it was to create. It wasn't because they were going to do what they were doing better. They could see opportunities outside of what they were doing. I often say to create a new sandbox, not just to think outside of it. So we went down to the Harvard Club. Renee Mabon was going to be giving one of those wonderful book launch talks. She's in the elevator with me. I talked to you about serendipity. I like chance. And so I said, I love your book. It's very visual. It's very, really anthropological. You understand humans. And she said to me, you should become a blue ocean strategist. And I said, what is that? And she said, I have no idea. Let's make it up. And so I went through practitioner training and I've done 500 workshops. And I've done it for clients in India and Mexico and Canada and across the U.S., large and small. The whole crux of it was that once you change your mind from do more of the same better, compete harder. Michael Porter's classic strategy was to compete. Take your share of the market, keep your expenses and your efficiencies good, and make sure your price is competitive. In a world that's expanding, great, but when your market is shrinking, that's just, you become commoditized and your pricing becomes the only thing that differentiates you. So what blue ocean thinking was, and I began to apply it, was to see the world as opportunities and to listen to what people were asking for that you typically said, no, we don't. And so I had a large client, Telerex, a division of Merck, and they were in the telephone answering business, and they hired us for blue ocean thinking. The problem was that people were shifting from calling to chat to, the web to all kinds of stuff. It was early in the great transformation. You look at websites today, telephone numbers are hard to find, and you have to go hunting to know. And so they were doing it the way we've always done it. And then we went exploring. And what we realized was that the world was shifting. The audiences were doing things differently. And if you did better at what you were doing, you could go out of business. And your clients weren't driving you. Your clients just needed to have a good place for their customers to find out solutions to their challenges. And so as we went through the process of discovery, very anthropological, we hung out, we listened on the phone, we went out with them to conferences, all of it to discover what they might be doing better or missing altogether. And then they realized that their job was to help their customers, their clients, Danone and Hershey's and other big clients, rethink the way they were providing customer service. Yes, the phones were important, they still are, but how to be single-minded about it was so narrow. And all of these other, how many different ways do we communicate and communicate today? So it's an interesting co-branding, I often thought, for myself. And I must say that they were doing a great job of marketing blue ocean strategy that enhanced the role of an anthropologist in discovery. Visual exploring is a big part of it, and that's exactly what we do. And so I've enjoyed my journey hanging on to that. I just did a webinar recently, and we had lots of turnout for people who were curious. People said to me, it's old. I said, no, it's not old. It's exactly what we need for today, a new way to see the future and to get ourselves aligned for it. So that's part of my serendipitous life story. How's that?
So you mentioned about seeing, perhaps seeing the future, trying to see how to change with the future here, right? So, at Simon Associates, you help organizations embrace that change, right? With a different lens, this blue ocean strategy that we're talking about. Do you have any frameworks or methodologies that you use when working with a client to take them from the starting point where perhaps, things are foggy or confused and they don't know what direction they need to go, to figure out what really is that change that needs to be made now? Anything that you might be able to share with the audience so that perhaps they could start turning those gears in their own head?
I'll give you a recent client, an association, and the International Fresh Produce Association. A lot of associations are struggling. And so what do we suggest? The world that you had isn't what people today want or need. They have many other ways of getting answers to their questions. AI. And so paying a fee to belong to a membership organization that isn't serving you well isn't worthwhile. So from a step, first thing we did was talk to a couple of dozen of their members and former members. And we asked them, what is it what's the gap? What do you need? Where's your pain points? What's keeping you up at night? And then we just listen. And I must tell you that we record their stories because I don't want to repeat it. I want a client to hear it. And then we want to do a thematic analysis of it so they can see the recurring patterns. The words you choose create the world you live in. And they were all telling us recurring stories. Yes, they needed training, but not the way they were doing it. Yes, they needed information, but don't send me another newsletter. They don't open emails because we don't use emails. And so if the world has changed, but your members are waiting for you to catch up, you need to rethink what you're doing. And the solution came with an agent and an AI for a database that's extraordinary. And they came up with it. I typically am an enabler and a facilitator, but the ideas are they're really there. And the technology enables you to do dramatically different things to solve the problems for your customers, your members, in ways that they are waiting for. And so now if you have a question about what do I do with the FDA's coming to train my staff, you can get into their data through their agent. It's blocked, so only members can use it, and find out all the 10 things you should prepare your folks for before the FDA arrives. So it's training just in time, it's wise, and it's certified, and it's exciting. And it's exciting to the organization. They also now can do their advocacy because their resources are spent in different ways. So typical is that discover first, go visually exploring. And then let's do a strategy canvas to map out where you're investing now and how does that map to what people are asking for. That strategic canvas is a wonderful way to take a picture of what's up and what's not and see about what you can open that's completely different. And then we need to go back out into the market and begin to assume that we are hearing correctly and test some of the ideas. And then we begin to shift the canvas, eliminating some things that don't work anymore, like in-person training, and raising some things that we've never done, which is all of this non-in-person training, but just in time. And as you do that, you begin to develop a new strategy that allows you to refocus on where the opportunities are, as opposed to sticking to what you've always tried to do. You did it okay then. I think Peter Drucker's comment, it's not the turbulent times that get you, it's trying to solve the challenges of turbulent times with yesterday's methods. And I do think that's exactly why the methodology, anthropology, blue ocean strategy, gives us an opportunity to help companies change, which is what I love to do. So if you're in pain, let's take away the pain and provide some medicine for it. It's right in your hands, right in your mind.
I love that quote that you shared, just the inability to solve today's problems with tools of yesterday, if I were to paraphrase that myself. And I love this idea that you're bringing to the audience of, simply just listening to your clients or your members. What are they going through? What do they need? What are experiences they've had? And perhaps for coaches and consultants out there who are, trying to get off the ground, we could say a good place to look is at reviews. Look at your competitors. Look at the people who you want to be. What are their clients saying negatively about them, right? Solve those problems. If you're solving problems for other people already, or at least tackling the problems people are telling you about, it's also a great starting point.
That's a great point, David. Just look at what your competitors' bad reviews. That'll give you great opportunities. Great idea.
Absolutely. So, Andrea, you have extensive experience and a great track record as a consultant and a blue ocean strategist as well, right? Deeply familiar with cutting through the market noise and, staying ahead of the changing times. If we look at the current state of the market today, especially for coaches and consultants who are struggling with client acquisition, one of the biggest challenges that any business faces, or one of the highest costs, we could say, there's some specific challenges that, are really prominent forces in today's market, right? There's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of confusion. It can be difficult to articulate what really is different about your business, especially if, you do feel you're in a blue ocean yourself. Andrew, with these market forces in consideration and your expertise in creating new markets yourself, what are your thoughts around these challenges and what are you observing today for coaches trying to gain exposure and connect with new clients?
Multiple questions there, David. Let's talk about it.
Yes.
This is not new, but we all have many friends. I mean, I'm a John Matone trained coach, but I find myself consulting much more comfortable to my approach than a coach. But the coaches that I know who are all trying to find a market, there are more coaches, it appears, than there are markets. And so the question, what's your brand? Why you? And how do you differentiate yourself? Because you're not just simply another well-trained coach. What's the problem that you think you solve for the folks who you are working with? I have a wonderful colleague who has a program built around increasing the joy of the folks she coaches with. And she's got a great approach that's different than others. It isn't about simply a coach that listens to your challenges and helps you find a pathway through. She's not an executive coach or a life coach or a retirement coach or how many different subsegments of it. But she's built it around that emotional feeling of joy. And what I love about joy is that we buy with the heart. So if you can help me find joy, fun, understand how to be happy, those are values that are different than what a coach normally would perhaps sell. And it works. Now, she has some interesting situations where she has clients who don't come to coaching sessions. They're being paid for by their company. That's an interesting part of the challenge for being a coach. Part of it, you talked about belonging, is a bond between a coach and a customer, a client, in a way where together we grow. And then I have another friend who's a coach, and then she can't get rid of her clients. And she is just, they love her dearly. And she's been with them for a long time, and they are all very devoted to her, and she helps them survive and thrive in whatever it is that they're dealing with. That personal relationship is very powerful. Now, going back to how does a coach find a customer base? I think that, well, as LinkedIn, I have 14,000 connections on LinkedIn, of whom I know 5. And so it's not as if you have to build a huge audience. What you do need is to be present. I think people still buy from people. And I do think that the most important thing for a person who's developing a new client base is to get out. Wherever there are people who are going to be talking about their challenges, thinking about it, panels where you can speak, TED Talks where you can articulate your unique way of doing it, speaking engagements where you can be the keynote. Find places where you can differentiate yourself and not be just another or a commodity. You need to create a new market space. Team up. Maybe a retirement coach or an executive coach and a lifestyle coach together can provide better wisdom. There's no magic to anything today. The problem is, I think we have a lot of folks who are leaving corporate and want to set themselves up as consultants. And I must say, I get a lot of them who want to be on my podcast. And I am very humble at times because I'm honored they want to, but their stories aren't differentiating and they aren't going to help anyone get off the brink. And I want to get people who can help you change and not simply tell you how they as a consultant or a coach can be good. I want you to know, what is it my clients can do differently? What are some of the 3 key things that a good coach is going to help them identify and turn from I'm unhappy to I'm joyful? And so I think this is a time to really, I'll say, rethink the coaching that's going on and think about what it is that you can do for whom and how you're going to craft a story that people will buy. And remember, they buy the story, not the facts. So what's the story? And I hope I've told you a good story that'll help your coaches.
Well, absolutely, right? That differentiation and telling stories about really what it is that you do to create your own blue ocean of sorts is incredibly invaluable. And, in the long run, investing in this differentiation and putting out value will really make a huge difference for businesses all across the board, coaching and consulting or otherwise as well. And, when we're looking at the short term, Andrea, when we're looking at perhaps actions that people can take to go out and connect with and draw in the right clients while still investing in that long-term attraction, we could say, are there any specific actionable strategies that you're using at Simon Associates to cut through the noise and, more effectively connect directly with people who you can serve and help?
What a wonderful question. The people buy from people. And it is important for me and who I am to be introduced to the right people for a referral. And referrals, word of mouth, remain extremely powerful way of finding clients. And it is important that the person who is referring you has the right story to share about what it is. So sometimes when we're talking to people, I'm looking for referrals. This is the story that I'm looking to share and the kind of clients I'm looking for. And if they cannot comfortably, relay that, it makes it more difficult. But I like to prepare people properly so that they aren't making it up. To simply say she's a good consultant doesn't do much good. What does an anthropologist do? I don't really know, but I know you like her. And so it becomes important to help others know how to speak about you and act as your endorser. Influencers, endorsers are co-brand you. They give you the power to go and really think about something. And I think your books help as well. So I have 3 books out and the 4th one coming. But the books were written so people understood what we are and what we do. And parts of the book, excerpts from the book, free parts of the book, all begin to help tell a story. And I do think it is important to be able to craft it in a way that differentiates you from the rest. And there are lots of rest.
So we're talking about differentiation. We're talking about trying to create a market of one, right? Or, yourself and your company as a market of one for all coaches and consultants out there, and really leaning into, what's different, where is that value? Right. There's a lot of things here that people need to look at and consider, but they don't have to work alone or act alone anymore these days, we could say, even if they are a business of one. Andrea, from your perspective, with the shifts we're going through today, with the advent of AI and how it's disrupting industries all across the board, when we're looking at consultants and coaches specifically, where do you see AI coming into play the biggest advantage with these things in mind to create a blue ocean?
Big question. The Times had an article today about how people think that the studies being done, things that you write with AI aren't as insightful as things that are done without any support from Google or anybody else. Socrates said a long time ago that writing was going to kill the human brain and make it really dull. It's been a challenge for a long time for humans as we create new technologies. I find that I use AI, and my husband does a lot of blog writing and social media support for our clients. Using AI, it's fast, then we humanize it, and then we turn it into things that are appropriate for the clients that we're working with. I've done proposals very quickly. It's very smart. It's got more data that it can process than my little brain can. So I embrace it, and I think it's going to be something that's going to help us change. And I don't think that's to be fearful. Remember, your amygdala hates me. It wants to fear me, flee me, appease me, fight me. And that's what is going on. But embrace it. I was with some folks and they're concerned that their daughter and son are going to lose their jobs because AI will replace them. I said they should become really very fluent in what AI can do for them. And then it adds value to them as opposed to replacing them. But if you're going to fight it, it's not hard to replace you. And I think that the challenge and the joy is going to be about expanding our skills as opposed to watching them take away. And I'm watching your face, and I have a hunch you're doing the same thing because I'm enjoying. My chat is my best friend. And when I have a question, I say, what do you think? And it comes back. And I say, well, I don't like that. How about this? And then, well, I like that too. And it's been an interesting development with something that's a robot. And I'm not so afraid of it. I'm using it to expand my own wisdom and realize I can't read as much as I used to. So I'm going to synthesize it. But for your listeners, the more joy you get out of it and make it joyful, make it fun. It's an adventure. It's like going to a foreign country where you know nothing. You don't know how to talk the language, but you're going to learn a whole lot about what life in Nepal is like. So that appeals to my explorer nature.
Hey, but even too much of a good thing can be bad at times, right? So, Andrea, from your perspective as a corporate anthropologist, right, when does AI become too much? Where does it start to compromise a business's not just effectiveness or not their ability, we should say, but their effectiveness to deliver what they're there for?
I don't think we've reached that point. I do know that there's some anthropologists looking at how human behavior is changing, how the words people are using, the conversations they're having, languages. Now, language is a core of being human. We talk to each other, we create stories, we build cultures. I don't know how we will know too much. I think we as humans are very clever, creative critters. You know, the spinning wheel didn't replace everything, and the manufacturing of fabrics didn't, the Luddites may have had a hard time, but we can really be clever and creative. And I think we should apply that to, remember, our brains change every time we hear a story. It's evolving. Your DNA is changing. You're not fixed. And so enlarge it and begin to let it develop. Now, you say, when will we have too much? I don't know. Have you got too much of social media? Too much of TikTok? Too much of, how many things have you got too much of? And I do think we're changing. But I'm not a believer that that's bad. I sort of want to see where it goes and then figure out how to make it work for the folks who I consult with. And I have a healthcare client for several years now. And the stuff that the new systems are coming out with, the doctor can see her whole patient's history before she meets with the patient. It's all synthesized. And it's accurate because it's all her data. And wow, she said, and I don't have to work so hard to read through the chart. It's all sitting there. And now I got to figure out how to get my folks to do it because it's going to come and we're going to reduce errors and improve care because we'll have more knowledge. I think there's a whole rich world coming. That's my 2 cents.
Well, I couldn't agree more, of course. Andrea, your insights into strategic adaptation, market creation, and the power of anthropological thinking are truly profound. To conclude, based on your philosophy of, rethinking growth and your belief that it's not the turbulence of change that will cause problems, but it's living with yesterday's models to try and solve tomorrow's problems. What's the single most important piece of advice that you'd offer to our audience who are striving to create new markets and achieve sustainable growth?
Go exploring. If you don't have to be an anthropologist, go talk to customers, go to non-customers, listen, open your mind to the challenges they're facing. Little like I did with International Fresh Produce Association or all of my clients. But get out of your office. Don't assume you know anything because so much is going on that's changing. You will not really do anything but impose on the outside what you believe to be truth. And then the only truth is there's no truth. And so the more you open your mind to go see what's going on, we go explore, go hang out in a customer's factory. Go hang out in their offices. Remote hybrid means that maybe you have to see people through computers. But whatever you do, get out of your office. So my one wisdom is don't sit in the office thinking you know much about anything from inside the company or outside. Go hang out with your employees. Go have lunch with them. Listen to what their challenges are. And you will come back with more ideas than you can execute. And then the hard part is figuring out which ones are primary and which ones are secondary. Because you don't want to explode everything, but you do want to start to change and test. So my joy is don't resist it, embrace it.
Deeply insightful. Andrea, thank you so much for sharing your story, your insights, and your lessons with the audience today. For anyone listening who might like to learn more about what you're doing, perhaps to reach out to continue the conversation or anything else, what would be the best way to find you or contact you or find your resources online?
Thank you for the opportunity. There's always LinkedIn, and LinkedIn, I am Andrea Simon. People call me Andy, and that's, sometimes a bit confusing, but I'm there. And LinkedIn is always our best buddy. But my website is simonassociates.net, and there you can find out all the things that we do and how we do them. But we love to talk. And so if you're just curious, I'm open for a conversation. Come talk to us, and we'll find ways to be insightful for you and help you in a new direction. Because the times they are changing.
Thanks again for joining us on The Growth Shift today.
My pleasure.
Another powerful conversation on The Growth Shift. If you, like our guests, are ready to turn your expertise into a predictable, scalable growth engine, one that eliminates the grind of prospecting and enhances your high-value relationships, then it's time to connect with Valentix. We are not a marketing agency. We are your strategic growth partner. Building intelligent systems that ensure your client acquisition is predictable, not dependent on chance. To see how our AI-powered frameworks can free up your time and fill your calendar with decision makers, visit valentix.io. Thank you for joining us on The Growth Shift. We'll see you next time.